Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gregory Yates, Head of Marketing Financial Services at Goldcast, and I'm thrilled to be hosting today's Goldcast Exchange, How Financial Services Marketers Break the Approval Bottleneck. Today, we're diving into a problem many of us face. How do we use the power of AI to generate content at scale without getting buried in compliance approvals? We're lucky to be joined by two leaders from Prudential who have been solving that exact problem. Or as I like to say, it's an opportunity. Now, before I introduce today's speakers, I'd like to go over a few household items that we'll cover and also what we'll cover during the call today, during the webinar today. Housekeeping. All right, so just so everyone knows, what we'd love you all to do is just make this really an interactive session. So just feel free, share your comments, engage in the chat, drop any questions you have into the Q&A tab. It will be anonymous, so don't worry about that. We are recording this, so after the event, all the content will be available and we'll be able to put it out and offer it to anyone who is interested. And then also we do have a docs tab that may or may not have some helpful resources. Just depends if during this call something is put within that environment, but feel free to check that in case there's any resources. But then also feel free to ping us as well with a question about any resources that could be followed up with afterwards. So now on to what we'll cover today. So we're going to be looking at kind of a few different topics here: navigating regulatory compliance, staying ahead of the latest regulatory changes, and automating compliance checks. We'll be looking at streamlining the approval process, basically automating routine tasks, improving stakeholder coordination, and ensuring version control. Also, we'll be evaluating and embracing new technology. We're driving productivity with new technology and reimagining workflows. So just really imagine today marketing teams having the ability to have the great power of AI at their fingertips, but really how do you deploy it, and how do you deploy it in a compliance manner? And then how do the teams really work together to be able to deploy this across the enterprise overall? So with that being said, and without further ado, I'd love to introduce Ashley Cheretes, Director of GenAI at Prudential, and Jen Massicotte, otherwise known as J Dynamite, Director of Supervision and Controls. Ashley and Jen, welcome. Welcome to the conversation and welcome to Goldcast Exchange.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for having us. The inaugural Goldcast Exchange, but who's counting?
Yes, the inaugural, although you've been on other webinars with Goldcast in the past, correct?
I have. There was one previous, a marketing alliance, AI marketing alliance, I think it was what it was called. So where Goldcast was a sponsor. So thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And today we're talking about alliances between departments as well. So it's like a perfect sort of segue and continuation from your last conversation. So before we land into the heart of today's conversation, I'd love for you both just to take a moment, introduce yourselves to the audience, tell us a little bit about your background, your current role at Prudential, and also how your work really intersects with marketing and compliance, especially in the evolving AI landscape. So Ashley, since you're on the left here and we read left to right, I'll start with you.
That's great. I love the rationale behind this. Good job. I would do the same. I love structure. For a creative person, I love structure. Yeah. So thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. Hi, everyone. If you're joining us from wherever you are, as Greg said, I'm Ashley Cheretes. I have a very unique and interesting background. So I am a brand and marketer's marketer, I like to say. And I've been doing that for about 17 to 18 years now. That I really feel old by saying that. But what's been most interesting is in the last 8 months, I've made this transition to a marketing technologist role. And in my role as a director of generative AI, I'm sure you're all probably like, what does that person do? Well, I work with fabulous people like Jen to integrate all of like new generative AI technology through and through the organization, specifically for marketing. So I have about 400 people or so using our solutions, and they really branch from straight marketing, so content creation, video generation, image generation, but then we also have our processes, so compliance and working with Jen, as well as others, to ensure that we're helping our folks not only understand AI and how it can help them, but really thrive using it. Because change is hard. And so it's been, I would say over the last 8 months, it's been me kind of helping to lead the change and get people comfortable with it. And then working with fabulous partners like J Dynamite, which, by the way, I did give her that nickname. I need that on record. I'm glad that you're recording, Greg.
Yes, absolutely. And Ashley, I guess part of like your team, so are you sort of a one-person operation that's sort of managing that, or do you have a whole team that also works with the extended marketing team across all these initiatives?
Great question. Yeah. So there are, I would say approximately, so I specifically focus on generative AI, but I
Mhm.
am in a great company where I work with another 10 product owners for all of our marketing technologies. We are the internal organs, I call, of the
Mhm.
marketing department because we are an Adobe shop. We use Marketo, analytics. We've also tested out Firefly and using Gen Studio. We're also using a number of other solutions across like AEM and analytics and all those other things as well. So I am kind of the one that I would say touches all of them, so to speak,
Mhm.
especially as we evaluate new capabilities for Gen AI.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Jen, I'm going to pass it over to you. If you could please tell everyone a little bit about your background, what you do at Prudential, and really how you align with marketing and compliance and bring it all together.
Sure, absolutely. Jen Massicotte, been with Prudential almost 25 years now, and at least the last decade or so, specifically in marketing compliance. And first off, org structure is everything. Here at Prudential, our compliance review process is actually part of the marketing department. So we do have compliance partners that we work with, but my team, which is responsible for the review and approval of all of our marketing material, we're embedded right into the marketing team. So it allows us to really understand what the business is doing, why they're doing it, and that helps impact how we review marketing material. So we feel like we're part of the process. We're not sort of off to the side that someone needs to get through, but really we consider ourselves another partner in the creative process to make sure that what the business wants to do, that we can do it successfully and not get the company in trouble. So that's kind of what our marching orders are.
Okay, great. And also another kind of follow-up question for you as well is I'd like to know like your team size, because obviously AI has really helped us in expediting literally everything that we do, right? But that also means that the amount of content that is being shuffled your way, I am assuming, has quadrupled or even more, grown exponentially, we'll just say. And so how are you in your team managing that, and have you grown the team, or is it really utilizing technology to help make these initial and the initial analysis, we'll just say?
Yeah, we've actually kind of shrunk, and a lot of that has been because of technology and efficiencies. So I only have 7 reviewers, and we support all of our domestic U.S. businesses, so our life insurance, our group insurance, and our annuities and retirement strategies. And we looked at over 8,500 pieces of marketing material just in the last year. And the only way that we were able to get through that much material was because we partner very, very closely with the business. And because we try to use technology to help us. We are always engaged in the development process. The first time we see something is not when it shows up in my team's lap to sign off on it. So because of that, we actually get material in really good order. I can get material in good order. I can review it, send it back, and the business can be on their way. My team's average turnaround time is actually less than 1 business day. Wow. And so we not only do a lot of work, we do it very, very quickly. And I'm blessed to have a fantastic team of supervisory principals who do those reviews. But we've also been working with partners like Ashley to find how technology can just help us continue to do more within our team. And we've been piloting some great technology right now that has allowed us to use AI functionality to pre-review the material, to tell us where we may need to see issues, to kind of act as a backup for our brains as we review material. Still human in the loop, but allows us to look at more content and with more degree of accuracy and hopefully get through it a little quicker. So we've been very blessed with the partnership we have with our MarTech team.
That's great. And just, you mentioned that you've been able to now bring turnaround times to a singular day. What traditionally, prior to the use of AI or generative AI, what was the traditional turnaround time?
So going back probably a couple of years, our turnaround times could have been upwards of 3 to 5 days. So we've been really able to compress that time frame. We've also worked at getting material compliant up front by, again, using different technologies. So one of the technologies that Ashley's been very involved with, Writer, which helps our writers write content. We've been partnering with them to make sure that that tool writes compliant material up front. So it really isn't just my team, but it's that whole end-to-end process and where we can embed ways to get us compliant before it gets to compliance has also helped us get that speed to market.
So now that's the second time you've mentioned that now, really, and kind of the operative phrase being this isn't the first time you're seeing it. So you might be going into this a little further into the presentation today, but maybe just even very top line, like explain that. It's like, are you being brought in from the very beginning? Is the team including you in the ideation process? I'd love to just kind of understand just, how you're able to kind of get a purview into what is being delivered to you before it's delivered to you.
Absolutely. So one example I'll use is when we're launching a new product. So when one of our business units is coming up with a new product, right when they're still in the product development phase, they will engage with us because it's important for us to know what kind of a product it is. So we know what type of filing strategy we may need to have. So we can start to think in advance what disclosures we might need to revise or update for that product. So we get involved right in that upfront sort of product development. Then as they're creating core materials, we have what's called roundtable discussions where we sit at a table with some of our other control partners, like our law team or our product development team, along with our marketers. And we go through the material and we really kind of see where there might be some red flags and offer suggestions before, again, the content gets fully settled. So that way they have opportunities to craft other language, to find different ways of making the point. And so, yeah, really by the time we've seen it in our queue for review, we may have actually been involved in that piece 2 or 3 times before it's actually at the end of the process for us.
So then that's interesting. So in theory, your job being really on the compliance side, could one say that now you're really truly part of the creative process? So could the word creative then be put underneath your title as well, So part
I
creative.
always want to be like the cool kids in marketing and say that like I'm a marketer and I'm creative. So if you want to give me that, I will take it and run with it. Absolutely.
Right. So I would love to pause here just briefly because we do have some polls for the audience, and I'd love to just display our first poll here. Shivika, if you could put that up, please, for everyone to see. So for everyone, how often are you currently using generative AI in your marketing efforts? We'd just like to kind of get an idea from everyone attending. So most of the time and occasionally. We'll give everyone another couple seconds.
I think that's to be expected while everyone chats a little bit. So one thing that I forgot to mention in my opening is that I was working with Jen and her team even before this opportunity. So I've been with Prudential 4 years, and I actually sat in the business. I was part of Prudential Advisors. And so it's been a really interesting journey because I know what the marketers go through and some of the pain points that they have. So when it comes to generative AI, especially, or even just traditional marketing, right? Like I can speak the language to help them, right? And so, something that I love about Jen and her team is that they're also open and receptive to feedback. Like being on that business side of it and saying like, oh yes, I need to get this content approved, that's fine. But working together with, like, I'll call them a business partner because they are a business partner, and seeing them as a teammate is a big part of how we're shaping the relationship.
Absolutely.
That's great. And also, like, as I'm thinking about this, as I'm looking at sort of the poll here, occasionally, as we're seeing most of the people stating it and how it's being used. Recently, I was interviewing several marketers at an award show and really asking them where AI was potentially used across the entire process, from ideation through production, deployment, and then also optimization. And it was really interesting how people were using it across all these different phases, or some of them just really not at all, still wanting that true human element. Ashley, what are you seeing in terms of teams and the teams internally at Prudential and how they are using it, and how has it permeated across the organization, obviously specifically to the marketing organization, but even across the organization overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at first it was experimentation, right? Like, let's get 20 users to test this out. Especially, like, I would say the biggest low hanging fruit for us was content. Like, how do we create text, but how do we do that compliantly, right? I'm not a lawyer, but for instance, there's a big difference between a publicly facing ChatGPT and a closed model that you're using that is not retraining with your data. So being aware of those nuances and those requirements is important, but also I'm going to share a slide up here because I don't want to steal the polls from Shavika. But what I will say is that there's many hands that make light work in all of this, right? So from a marketing perspective, I had rattled off a few things. So we're using it for content generation. We're using it for video generation. We're using it obviously for compliance, like as Jen has mentioned. But our number one mantra is always human in the loop, because it is AI. It's not 100% accurate. So what we've done is taken our standard processes and figure out where AI fits in with that. That's step one for us. But step two is really, okay, well, now we have agentic that's coming. That is the buzzword of the year, right? With all of that, we have to say, okay, well, maybe we need to be open to how we refine the process or refresh the process and all of those things. And also couple that with the regulatory pieces, which Jen knows very well, that there's also a requirement that humans need to review the content. So we're still ensuring that in the creative process as well as the compliance process, that there is a human in the loop.
So as you're talking, as you mentioned, agentic is a buzzword right now, especially as more and more agents are being built, essentially. Just so everyone truly understands what that term means as it applies to AI and agents, could you just kind of define that for the audience, please?
Yes. So I will say that this is Ashley's definition, okay? because it's true that Jen knows. Everyone has a different definition of what agentic is, okay? I have seen that some partners are calling the generative AI agents, right? That's not really what they do. When you think of an agent, it does a number of things. It not only will take in your information and generate content, but it will also make decisions. It can action off of those decisions. And then last but not least, from an agentic perspective, there is a reinforcement learning piece where, like, it ultimately has to learn what's been successful and what the overall goal is to make it work. So for me, agentic AI, there's an action that needs to happen. There's an action that associated with the work versus, and it's really, I call it a very fancy workflow and the automation piece. I actually have a slide on that if you want me to share it, Greg.
Sure. Is it coming up, or is it a completely different slide?
No, it's coming up. I'll say
there it is.
There it is. Ta-da. Okay. So the way that we think about phases of AI is, first and foremost, and this is more just for everyone, depending on where you are in your AI journey, evaluate your current partners. Evaluate what's currently available. If you're using something that is an enterprise tech stack like an Adobe, great. If you're using something like a HubSpot, great, whatever. I know Goldcast also has some awesome AI features as well, but evaluate what you have first and foremost, because what we're also starting to see is AI is the buzzword. So everyone is rushing to add it into their stack. Next, for us, it's how we look at external platforms. So Norm, Safer, Writer, these are all like Jasper, all of these platforms that we're using, they are external. One of my colleagues calls it the swivel chair, where literally you're doing compliance in this platform and then you swivel around and do something in this one. So that's how we can start. That's ultimately how we get that low hanging fruit to understand how AI is providing business impact for us, because we measure everything. And then focus now on the integrations. And this is where we are currently. How do we integrate not only what we're doing from a process standpoint, but the technology? So when you think about a writer, well, people are still writing in Microsoft Word. So let's get the plugin in there to generate content. Let's get it into our Workfront system for how we're generating tickets, whatever it is from a business problem standpoint. And then last but not least, that's what I'm calling it workflow automation, but AKA agentic. It needs to make decisions. It needs to take in the information and really create an action in order for it to be truly agentic, and making sure that all the systems are connected in between.
It's basically kind of like one step closer to artificial general intelligence, when machines can truly start to think on their own and almost be sentient to a degree.
Yes, I mean, not that crazy yet, okay? But it is coming, but also we're being smart about it. So I'll just give you a quick example. We are evaluating a platform that is specifically for agentic content authoring. So if you have thousands of pages on your website like we do, imagine having to update a component across 100 pages. Yeah. That is such manual work, going in and out of pages, publishing it, saving it, like all those things. We haven't even talked about the compliance piece, Jen, but that taking that pain, I always say AI helps eliminate pain. So when it comes to doing the automation piece, focus on the pain points and then see where you can help the process.
Yes. Well, I think that what you just said was truly key, that it helps to eliminate pain. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they're trying to implement a new technology, and even the procurement process and kind of that bringing in centers of influence, trying to build consensus around something, that could be a pain point that people have to overcome, essentially, to get to reducing that pain in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
So, which is a great little segue. Actually, what I'd like to do now is go to one more poll before we go to the next slide. And Shivika, if you could give that to the audience, please. So poll number 2, what's the biggest challenge your team faces with AI and compliance? Okay, so some haven't been using AI yet. Unclear policies. This is interesting. So a couple questions that I have now based off of the poll here is really one for you, Ashley. It's going to be, you have people here saying that they don't use AI quite yet. I almost feel that you could help to give a little bit of the why they should, or a roadmap, or even how they kind of really get started. And then the unclear policies piece, Jen, I think that's really something you're going to be able to answer. How does a company move forward and develop clearer policies, right? And I'm sure it's hard because it's new. People are maybe unsure what policies should be created. And just like anything new policies will be created after accidents happen. We'll just say at times, right? so it's standard, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so really, Ashley, I'm gonna have you start. Really, what is something, that people on this call today could take away to learn about why they will want to start using AI, how they really go about it, maybe even the due diligence process, and how it can be important for them to bring it into their organization. And then we'll eventually kind of get into maybe how they can really build consensus among that center of influence, we'll just say. But what's advice for you have to those that aren't quite using it yet, and that why they should be using it?
Yes. So first, just to set the stage, I am not the rule maker of AI. Okay, I just want to be clear of that. As you saw, and I'll switch to this slide. Many hands, I said before, make light work for AI. And truthfully, Prudential as an organization made a decision back in 2023 that we were going to establish a responsible AI team. And it sits in our Chief Data Office, or we call it CDO for short. And it is comprised of privacy and security, global technology, legal, risk, all of those things. Because really, it's amazing that legal and risk are involved, because really it's a risk to not be using AI. It's a risk to really say, oh, I'm going to ignore it. And candidly, we had people in the marketing organization that was like, I am not going to use this. This is not going to work for me. AI can't do what I do. I'm a writer. I've been writing for years. How dare you? Really, when you think about the use cases for AI, you can use it for brainstorming. You can use it to enhance your creativity even further. I'll even just go basic and say there is no such thing as writer's block anymore. Generative AI can help you break through that opportunity. And I would say it's not perfect, of course, but I think that the first place that everyone should start, if they're not doing anything at all, is understanding the readiness of the organization. Meet the people, shake the hands, kiss the babies, right? Try to meet those folks and try to understand, like, well, what is the level of comfort with this? For us, marketing was a slam dunk and very easy, quite frankly, because it's publicly facing content, right? It's focused on content that quite frankly gets reviewed by a human, aka Jen and her amazing team, Jane and but then also it's important to note that humans are looking at everything. So given those parameters, and then of course on the technical side, I mentioned obviously using a closed LLM if you're creating content, but there are other things that your technology team should be reviewing to ask questions. Training data matters. Like I always get this question, what else should we worry about? The data that your platform is trained on is so important. So understanding that is key, but then also Prudential takes it a step further. And when we train, if there's content that we're utilizing or like even like a specific look and feel, we license that. We pay people to use their artistry and the work that they're putting together, which is a really cool concept. I'm very proud that we do that. And then last but not least, I think that there was one last thing that everyone should do. It's like, hey, I attended this really cool webinar where Prudential, a 150-year-old company, was presenting on how they're using AI. Because really, we're proof that we can help move us all forward. So if we're doing it, I know that you can too.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you just even kind of mentioned a couple times now about a closed LLM, right? Large language models. When I first started using AI, probably back in 2015, at the time it was pretty much machine learning. You really had to train and customize the algorithms to cater to your direct needs, the outputs essentially, because it's all about knowing the inputs to get the outputs. If you could just let everyone know really the importance, especially in financial services, of that closed LLM model, so that way it kind of stays within the organization. But also, as you said, the reason why people should be doing it is historically, when using AI, the systems had to learn, and it still has to learn, right? And I always looked at it as like a baby that had to grow up in order to become a teenager and then an adult. And there was a time period that it took for it to learn all that information. Now it moves much more expeditiously, you can say. But as you're saying, for people getting started, if you could just explain really kind of that closed LLM so people feel comfort in wanting to utilize AI, generative AI in their organization. But then number two, really the disadvantage being that if you're not training your system now, or you're not really learning how to properly prompt it, which is basically creating detailed briefs so you can get the outputs you want, you're at a disadvantage due to the lack of learning that you're getting, but also the lack of education you're giving to your generative AI system.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love to use real life examples. So inside Prudential, we have two, I would say, like MVP standard LLMs in the organization. There may be others, candidly, but like for us, the ones that we use regularly is we have our own closed open AI model. It's called Artie. That's the name that we actually named it. So any employee can use generative AI at any point. So it sits right on our intranet. There's a link right there, and it's like, hey, talk to Artie. It is, so I'm going to use another term, RAG. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's called Retrieval Augmented Generation. What that means is you're using documents that you already have and uploading it and basically pinging up against it. So when you prompt and say, hey, I really like this social post, but now I want to create one for this type of audience and make sure to include like these top challenges in the copy to help that audience overcome them. So they call it a RAG. A RAG is ultimately giving it a subset of data to process to give you the output that you desire. If you use ChatGPT alone, right, there's a lot of prompting that you have to do to get it to understand what you want. And yes, there's some context and some things out there that you can provide it, but RAG is like that added layer of intelligent data that you want it to look like something. You want it to sound like something. So one thing that we do a lot on the marketing side, because we do use Artie, like anyone has access to Artie from an employee standpoint, but with writer in particular, it's trained on our style guides. It's trained on how we speak, words we do say and don't say. Jen gave me a list of words we do say and don't say to train the model.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So those things are really essential to obviously, bridge the gap. But in addition, we want it to sound like us. So we've also created voices. We've created voices for like the Prudential voice, obviously, but we can create a voice for a particular campaign if we wanted to, or even an executive. There could be an Ashley voice. I don't think anyone would ever want that, but still, we can do that. But what I'm really trying to convey here is that you have to make it your own to make it work for you. And when it comes to open versus closed, open is obviously you're going to a publicly facing website, you're putting information in there, and it can take those details and train the model with it. So you have to be careful what you do there. Prudential does not allow that. That's why we have our own closed LLM with on Azure, specifically for Artie. And then we use Palmyra, which is closed. And Palmyra is also interesting on the writer side because it's trained on a curated data set. So it's not pulling in like the Reddits of the world, the MySpaces of the world, every angry person that's ever put something out on the internet. It is trained on curated data sets, and they train it for us, which is great. Like, have to maintain that piece. Yeah. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it definitely, it helps quite a bit. And also just even when using it, even when you're training it, you also have to worry about at times AI hallucinating, right? So giving non-factual information. So, I mean, there's many a times that I've used a generative device and, typed something in and it just delivered to me something I just knew was false. And so it's kind of funny, like you query it, then again, prompt it again. This doesn't seem accurate. Oh, yes, Mr. Yates, I'm sorry, this was wrong. So tell me, tell me about what you're seeing there in a professional use and across Prudential, but then what are the guidelines or the training that you're giving individuals to look out for hallucinations?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a great question. I will say that it really depends on the use case, right? So if you're creating content about a product, let's say, because we are a product manufacturer, that's probably pretty easy to check, right? But we do have a QA process where not only like sometimes will like the actual writer proofread, but we have proofreaders as well that will look at it. Plus we have Jen's team that will look at it, and they require us to cite sources as well. So the one thing that that a lot of these LLMs will do, I mean, publicly facing as well, use Perplexity and all that, and ChatGPT search, it will give you sources. So that's one way to check it, but really there's no way of getting around it. You have to check as a human to make sure it's not hallucinating. Yes. I will purposely go, especially if I'm using a RAG and I've uploaded a document to Writer or to Artie and said, hey, like create this information. It will tell me what page it got it from. I will physically go in and check to make sure that it's the right information. Jen would be proud of me. Yes. Yeah.
So in theory, anyone using it should obviously do their due diligence before even then circulating it to compliance or other divisions. There is a question that came in, and this is a question that pertains, Jen, to what you mentioned earlier about you said that the average turnaround time is around 1 business day. And the question is that all in or is that per round?
That's a great question. That is our kind of round. So in theory, if you've been doing a great job all along and you get to my team and you submit it to us and it's good to go, then that's all you need. I will say statistically, we reject back with comments about 20 to 25% of our submissions. So I guess I don't know, is that high or low? I can tell you from my perspective, we continually work to make that a lesser number, but a lot of it is just my team is knowledgeable and expert at what they do. We don't expect the entire business to have the level of knowledge that my team does. So there will always be things that we're going to catch that we don't expect the business users to know that information. That's why we're here. We're subject matter experts on that topic. So, but what we try and do is one, we try and reduce how many things that get rejected up front. And we try and make sure that if we do have to send something back, it's just going back once. We review the entire document. We make all of our comments at once. I will say, though, talking about AI, is that this is one of the benefits of an AI compliance tool, is what I would refer to as a pre-review. So right now, I know Ashley had mentioned both Norm and Safer as two technologies that we're currently working with to test out on how this works in doing that function. And we've had really great success in allowing our business team to upload their material and get that AI initial readout. And it's been able to earmark missing disclosures, or as Ashley mentioned, missing source data or other information that may be promissory or misleading in their content that they may want to take a look at. We tell them that you can't rely on that, but it's a great way to see how good is your content. Is there, if you get a lot of comments, maybe you pause and we have a meeting, we talk through it. But we've been able to really kind of leverage that technology to start to, again, give the business more tools up front to make sure that we can keep that speed to market going, but then also give my team those tools as well to make sure that we're not missing anything and we are really kind of doing a very complete review when we look at it.
So you also said something that was, to me, that was key a little earlier, because part 2 of this question was, have you found that tech AI has limited the number of back and forth rounds needed for each piece? But my question is going to be sort of on top of that, and with a comment as well, like, how do you feel that AI has improved cross-function collaboration? Because one, now you're collaborating more with the marketing team and you're collaborating at an earlier stage. So did AI act as like a catalyst to increase the conversations or increase that cross collaboration? Or is it truly AI that's helping to limit the number of back and forth? So do you really feel that it's all about, hey, I'm now sitting down with the marketing team at first, they're getting guidance, so this way when they're already creating something that's already somewhat compliance ready? Or are you finding that it's AI that's really helping to reduce those rounds overall?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I will say, I think one of the key factors is having us in that process sooner and having that discussion with our partners earlier. But one thing that we've really, which we weren't expecting, and I don't know why, we should have been, was one of the issues that we often have when we're reviewing material and we find something that is a statement maybe that can't say. Maybe it's a little too promissory. Maybe there's something in there that's a little bit much. Again, my team are not professional writers, right? That is not our area of expertise. And so we would often struggle with, I can read it and I can tell you that that's not going to fly, but I can't always give you great guidance on how to restate it, right? And so using tools like Writer, like a Norm or a Safer have been super helpful for us to turn around and give our business partners jumping off points that are a lot better written than anything I can come back with. Because the last thing we want is to turn our marketing material into legalese. We're actually trying to do like the opposite. We don't want pages and pages of legal disclosures. We encourage our business as much as possible to put a lot of that required information into the copy. And if they can find a way to do that reads well, it's win-win, because then the consumer is getting a more balanced piece and we're eliminating a lot of that legal jargon. So that has been one of the big successes that we found in using these tools, is our ability to give the business great options when we have to address language. And again, I think that helps them turn around those comments very quickly and get them back through the process.
And then kind of to tag on to that, have you noticed, just from your experience, has even the conversation with FINRA changed, right? In how that communication process is even taking place? Because this is obviously a new area for everyone. And as we're saying, it's still sort of an uncharted territory to continue to evolve. Tell us about the experience there and having FINRA approve everything, especially if it has been generated by a machine.
Yeah, I will say both FINRA and state departments of insurance and other government agencies that review material, they tend to be the last ones to know about what to do with technology. In fact, they often come to their business partners like us to say, what are you guys doing and how are you managing this? And so we have had there's been lots of industry conversations, and then Prudential as a business has had conversations with our state partners and with FINRA to talk about the impact of tools like AI on marketing material. Right now, the main mantra is there still needs to be a human in the loop, and that is kind of across the board. because they do understand that as good as the technology can be, there is a responsibility that you can't put on a tool, that you have to put on a person that looks at material and says, we believe that this is meeting certain standards. One thing, though, that the states and the regulators have been looking at is, at a minimum, identification of content that might be generated by AI. And the main thing that they're looking at is to ensure that companies have bias protected against. A lot of times when you use AI models, they may have unknown bias built into them. And again, this is bias that if you just had a human that was doing the work, they're probably working very hard to avoid that. And you don't see what the tool's doing behind the scenes, so you don't know what the tool is doing to avoid it. So there are some rules that have come out recently to make sure that, like, for example, if we do modeling or things like that, that the models have been tested to ensure that they are not they're not biased in any way. So they've been trying to keep up with some of what AI is doing, but I feel like in general, they do lag, and we have a responsibility to kind of educate our regulatory partners on where we are and how they can kind of come along the ride with us.
Well, it's interesting. You just mentioned bias, and it just brought me back to the earlier machine learning days where there are different algorithms, some with bias and some without, right? And then how to program those and understand that AI can, in theory, just go out of control or off the rails, right? Because it can just keep going off and off and off unless it's course corrected and back on. But brings us now to kind of where I was asking before, which was from our second poll. One of the reasons that people have challenges implementing is unclear regulatory guidelines, like internally, right? And Prudential, it's a large organization. When you're implementing a tool of that particular nature, any technology tool, is this something that's working across all of Prudential, which would include, say, PGIM, Jennison, other properties that you have, or is it specific to each brand? And how are you and your team and the overarching compliance team defining these guidelines for everyone, especially in a somewhat new territory?
Great. Yeah, I'll take that one. And then Jen,
yes,
feel
thank
free
you.
to add. So with respect to, I mentioned earlier, I don't make the rules, right? I help enforce them, right? I give guidance, I consult, all of those things. But I will say that when it comes to our chief data office that we're working with all the time, they have a group, it's called Responsible AI. They focus on all the things we're talking about, including another word that people may or may not have heard yet is explainability. So in addition to bias, because it is computers, but explainability, how do you explain the output? Like, where did that come from? So understanding that from any potential partner that you're working with is really important. You can ask them, how do we focus on explainability in this platform? How do we focus on observability? What are people doing with it? So even though we are trying to stay close with the teams, oftentimes what we find is, like, we'll bring in a solution on the marketing side, because again, I roll up into the marketing side, our MarTech strategy group. And really, then we have other groups that reach out to us. So that happened with Writer. So we brought in Writer as an organization on the MarTech side for all of our team of marketers and marketing strategists to use. And then other groups started reaching out to us, say, hey, I have an HR use case. Our friends at PGIM, they also came to us and said, we want to try to use that as well. So we're all testing these sorts of things. So we're not mandating AI, like we're not mandating you have to use these platforms, but we are saying, yes, let's vet them out. Let's make sure that they work for us from a compliance standpoint. And it's very responsible of us to be using these platforms. But also at the same time, they're finding that it's much easier to get use cases approved for things that they're already doing. Because I think one thing that might also be helpful is it's not always the technology, it's the use case. So what exactly do you want to do with AI? And then we have to take that. So in that HR use case I mentioned with Writer, they had to go to our Responsible AI committee and work through that process and tell them what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, and ensure that they also weren't going to put things like PII, employee data, or customer data into the platform. So there are parameters that we set, and really it's in partnership with our chief data office. They're the ones that are setting the stage. We're having the conversation. I am a champion specifically for AI, obviously, but really I am an extension of the responsible AI team. So staying ahead of it and in the partnership is what we're aiming to do.
So tell me about that responsible AI team. And I know certain organizations have brought together people across all different functions in committees, right? So that way you can get a best understanding of how it could potentially be used across all different divisions of a business. How did Prudential go about building that responsible AI committee, and what are the decisions that are being made, and what are the conversations that are taking place? Is everyone responsible for coming back with some level of research or how they think it could be used? Tell me a little bit more about that, and anyone on this call, how they might be able to build a steering committee at their own organization.
Yeah, that's great. So actually we have, I guess I'll say we have technically two steering committees. One is obviously the overall chief data office and the responsible AI team that has all of the folks listed here. So privacy, security, legal, global technology, risk. Also, they listen to us. So I'm part of that group technically. Like I always say I'm like a dotted line to them, because really everything that I do needs to ladder up into how they're thinking about it. So that formed in 2023. Unfortunately, I wasn't in this role at that time, but I can tell you that it was like, okay, this is really becoming a thing. But quite frankly, this is not the first time that Prudential has used AI before. And I joke and say, like, there's old AI and new AI. The old AI is like, we make the rules and the computers and the machines listened. New AI is where you have to like ask a bot, ask your AI, hey, can you help me create something? Can you help me message this? Like, can you generate this, right? The generation part is what's new. So in the formation of the chief data office, it's almost like, we need them as much as they need us, because we need to continue to push the organization forward. But then on the marketing side, I would say marketing and brand side, we do have a steering committee that is focused on what business outcomes do we need? What are those things that we're doing, and how do we find the right technology and the right priorities? Because I will tell you, you can get very lost in the sauce in terms of like how many platforms are out there, how much work there is to do around each one. So we started very small. We said, we're going to test out small things with small groups. And so if it didn't work, we failed fast and moved on. That's how we look at it. But in the steering committee, not only do we talk about the technology, but we talk about the opportunity. So what is the business opportunity around how we're using AI? And then the accountability piece is huge. What metrics are we measuring? So like for the norm and safer pilot, like I'd love Jen to talk about this more, but like we were very, I would say diligent in ensuring that, I joke and say like, we're very great at Prudential in terms of like our community impact, but we're not Prudential the charity. We're here to make money and make sure that we have business impact. So if our business partners have what they need, our communities have what they need, it's all for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. When we tested out, and we're still doing it right now, it was really important for us to Ashley's point, to make sure that these technologies actually helped us do more, right? Yeah. If they were just nice to haves, well, we could spend the money in a lot of places. So we had to show that they increased our speed, they increased our accuracy, they reduced risk. We had to quantify that. And so we did a lot of side-by-side comparisons where I had two people on my team reviewing the same piece, one through the tool, one in our kind of standard process. We looked at what types of things the tool was picking up versus, again, a non-tool user reviewing the material. And we found real value from using those tools. We found that the tool was absolutely helping us be more accurate. We found that the tool was helping us be faster. And because of those reasons, we are continuing to, go down those paths to work with those technologies, because we know that will help us scale. because the more material that Prudential produces, especially as we go to, more personalization and more, content that's being created, we need to be able to scale with them. And tools like this are really important in making sure that we can do that.
Well, you just mentioned really ROI, right? You both are talking about it, and especially efficiency. One of I think the challenges that I've seen across corporate organizations are people are scared of their jobs, right? So they're worried that AI is going to usurp their position. What is Prudential doing to train and or build a culture of innovation, for its employees, right? So therefore, people aren't necessarily worried about job loss, and that how AI could really help to solve mundane problems and even make their jobs even better, but then also even help them focus on new skills and then maybe even move into other positions within the organization. What is Prudential doing to support its current employees across that whole workflow process?
Yeah, that is the question. I mean, it really, and truthfully, being here from the beginning and having people, and I mean, honestly, my first week in this job, someone walked up to me at a town hall and said, "What do you do? And why do you do it? And why are you talking about AI? And like AI is going to take my job." And it was constant fear. And I think at the center of my role, it is a change agent. It is how we push things forward. But that person turned around to me about a month ago and said, the more I use AI, the more I'm not scared of it, because it knows that it needs a human. Yeah. So being concerned is valid and fair, because truthfully, it is a change process, a change in process, a change in how you do things, but also we need more content. We need more personalization. We're not doing everything that we possibly should be to give that customer the best experience, specifically from a content generation standpoint. We would love to have one-to-one conversations with all of our customers in marketing. That, I think, is the nirvana of all
the whole thing,
the world, right?
Yeah.
But we need to understand that AI has to be part of that because it helps scale those activities. Yeah. I'll give a really quick example, and I know I've said this a few times now, but in a lot of these platforms, like a Writer or a Jasper or something like that, we can also create scale. So most recently, we have been focusing on how do we generate our verbatims and make sense of them to deliver back to the business. So we have a NPS score program where we're not only speaking to advisors, but we're speaking to customers, and ultimately how they feel about the experiences with us, whether it be online or positioning a product to their clients, all of those things. With that in particular, we get thousands and thousands of verbatim comments in these surveys. We do have a survey tool that we use that is great, but in terms of making sense of it all, it takes hours and hours to pull out that information. So what we did is we actually built an app in Writer that takes all of that data, takes the verbatims, pulls out the key themes, pulls out quotes. It also has been doing a great job of actually identifying the survey where that verbatim came from, which is super cool and super slick from a validation standpoint. And then last but not least, when you're an analyst and you're creating a report, it's not always easy for you to identify what needs to happen from a recommendation standpoint. So this is the biggest part, I think, that is most helpful to the businesses, is that we are able to deliver, I call it a spark, but basically it's a recommendation. What do they need to do to overcome some of these negative feedbacks that are coming in? That's a big challenge. What we're finding, because I'm a marketer through and through, I have to say this, and this is the last thing I'll say, from a business metric standpoint, we are finding that we can get through these reports and deliver them 50% faster overall, which means that our businesses can action off much more quickly, and we can improve our scores for the next time.
Yeah, you cut your time in half. So one last thing I'm going to bring up here is we did submit another poll to the audience, and which was, where would you most want to use AI if compliance wasn't a blocker? And the two highest scores were ideation and audience segmentation. Now that sort of parlays into like the next, segues into really the next question that I have for you, which is, what tools do you use at Prudential? Just because there's so many different tools out there, and when someone's just getting started, like, is it Perplexity? Is it ChatGPT? Wait, what's Firefly? What's Jasper? And the thousands of others, right? So where do you get started? Number one, like, how does that initial diligence take place, and how do you define what it is? And then secondly, what tools are you using at Prudential? Because I think everyone here would just love to get an understanding of maybe the tech stack or the AI stack that you have that's working quite well for you and reducing your time, significantly.
Yes. All right. Well, I will mention, I've already said writer at least 300 times. So that's,
We like writer.
we like writer. We do. I mean, we do. It's great. It's a great compliance tool, not only for finance, but there's also a healthcare component as well. So for other regulated industries, right? So that's been really helpful. We also test out other tools purposely. So we do use Jasper, which is a competitor, right? I think we need to have a real conversation about that. I mentioned our I'll say employee facing tool that is built on OpenAI. It is ChatGPT. It's a closed version of ChatGPT. In addition, we are working on several others, including we are testing out Runway, which is a video generation tool. We are also testing out Norm and Safer from a compliance perspective that we just talked about. But then also we use this platform called Gradial that was that content authoring platform that I mentioned on the agentic side. So that's another one. And then we're also looking at how do we humanize some of the things that are not so human right now. So for instance, have you ever heard like a terrible voiceover that sounds like a robot? We all have, right? So looking at Well Said is another platform that we're taking a look at. So there's no shortage of platforms, but the final thing that I'll end on is we are also very focused on the integration. So I also mentioned earlier in this conversation that Adobe is I'll call it a platform of record. Yeah. They are integrating AI into their platform as well. And I would say with so many solutions out there, my focus is on the user. So the creatives that are using the technologies, the business people that are using the technologies, how do I make their lives easier? And that is the integration and automation piece. So you can have as many tools as you want, but if it's a pain to get through and a pain to use and all of those things, and it doesn't feel very easy, then you're going to have a problem.
Yes, that's fantastic. And just so everyone knows, all three of us are AI avatars, so AI no longer sounds like a machine.
Yes, exactly.
So we're coming up on the hour here, but there are some questions that happen to come in. So I'm going to kind of ask these of you both. So you two are innovative and clear champions in using AI. You mentioned quantifying stats. Long term, how has adoption looked, and how do you guarantee it sticks?
This is such a great question. Do you want to go? I mean, because well, it's a big change for her team, right?
It's a huge change, and I think you're the one who says this quote that AI gets rid of tasks, not jobs. See, like I'm quoting her now. And I think someone else had mentioned, but you mentioned before about like the fear, right? When I sit down with my team and I say, listen, if I could get rid of the 5 things that you do that are just not fun, they're boring, they're just like drags on your energy. Like, wouldn't that make your day better? Wouldn't that be like just invigorating, right? And so we've really looked at how can we measure what those things are and how much time they take, and then be able to say, can we use AI to shorten or just get rid of some of those tasks, and then turn that time into now value that I can reapply elsewhere. So I know specifically for my team, that is one of the big stats that we look around is the time that we spent on different tasks, and how can we kind of re-leverage that saved time elsewhere.
That's fantastic.
And I'll add too. So my role is like a product owner, not like it is a product owner role. Hello, among all the other things that you might have heard me say today. But with that, the best thing I can do is stay close to our users. So I've set up programs so I love this question so much, because if you're going to invest in the technology, you need to ensure that people are going to use it. So look at those reports, survey your users, I have a user group that I instilled particularly, and every time, I mean, I don't get the whole 400 of people joining us, but I get like a solid like couple, 100 or so people that are interested in talking about their use of Writer or their use of something else, and giving feedback. I love polls. That is probably my most favorite thing. So I always start the meeting with a poll to see how people are reacting to the platform and what they're using it for. So that is probably the number one way that I can stay abreast of what's happening with them and how they're feeling about it, because then also I can share that feedback with Writer or share that with Jasper, like whoever I'm working with.
No, that's great. Thank you. And we are unfortunately at the hour here. I know we could probably sit and talk for another 3 hours enjoying this conversation. I hope everyone else on the call is. I know there's some additional questions that have come in. Maybe we can answer those on the side afterwards. But Jen, Ashley, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your expertise and helping everyone kind of learn about how we can really bridge that communication, historically, that communication gap between marketing, compliance, align everything together. And the one thing I just want to also conclude with is what I've seen really AI and how it's been able to help organizations is I've always found that communication across an organization is always quite challenging. And I think the way that people need to prompt, or we'll call like a brief AI to get the output that they want, is actually teaching us how to better communicate exactly what we're trying to convey and what we're looking for, which then can translate essentially to people communicating across an organization as well. And hopefully it's helping to bridge all of those particular gaps. So again, thank you both for joining today. And if anyone has any follow-ups, feel free to reach out to all three of us. And again, this has been Goldcast Exchange, and I look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you all. Bye.